And I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people? Trade war insanity goes on. We will never be the 51st state. And I see there's some pigeons up there giving me a round of applause or something, flapping their wings, but a little bit distracting. Hearts are with you. I know that this is a very difficult and stressful time. Some of you have already got layoff notices. Others are worried you might face them in the future. You're scared. You're stressed. You don't know what's going to happen. I want you to know that Canadians are with you. We will fight for your jobs, and we will make sure the supports are there in the event of layoff. We'll make sure that EI provides payment promptly to help you keep food on the table, and we will work to get you back into a paycheck as soon as possible. And I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people? These are great Canadian people. American workers, just like them, are going to lose jobs if this continuing trade war insanity goes on. There is no good reason to do this to these good people. Stop the tariffs, stop the chaos, let's solve this problem, and that will mean that workers on both sides of the border can get their lives back, and both the nations could be stronger, safer, and more secure. We will always be a sovereign, independent nation. We will never be the 51st state. We will always be proudly Canadian, and we will fight for the Canadian promise. I go further to say that that Canadian promise has always been the reason for my political career. We want this to be a country where hard work means anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that a hard-working person gets a great life on a safe street and a beautiful house under our proud flag. But that promise is broken after 10 years of the Trudeau-Carney Liberals. The lost Liberal decade has seen, over the last 7 years, $500 billion of investment leave our country for the US. Our per capita GDP has been the worst growth among all of our competitors. Housing costs have doubled and gone up faster than in any other G7 country. And now the Liberals think they should be rewarded with a fourth term in office. Furthermore, they brought in a carbon tax in this law. This law is still in place, even though Mr. Carney has signed a fake executive order to hide the tax for 35 or 40 days leading up to the election. It is still in place, and it applies across the board. The tax is scheduled to go up 300% over the next 5 years, and hiding it for a few weeks will not change that. Furthermore, the full carbon tax also applies to industries like those here at Iveco. Iveco makes hot-rolled steel wire and steel billets, and these taxes drive up the cost of the entire domestic steel industry. Mr. Carney has said that he wants to expand the industrial carbon tax beyond the already eye-watering increases the government has passed into law. He specifically singled out steel in an interview he did on CTV. He said that Canadians don't buy steel, they don't need steel, and therefore it won't do any harm to tax steel. Although he did admit that the tax would drive up the cost of an automobile by just $200. I don't think anybody believes that. Remember when the Liberals told us that the earlier carbon tax wouldn't cost you anything? We learned later that that was not true. Carney's proposed shadow carbon tax will be bigger than Trudeau's carbon tax. And it's ultimately a trick. Hide the tax before the election and then bring it back bigger than ever after the election. This was a bad idea before the Trump tariffs. But now that Trump is hitting Canadian industry with a massive tariff, Carney is saying that he will impose a massive carbon tax on Canadian businesses. The combination of Trump's tariffs and Carney's carbon taxes would be a disaster for the workers behind me. Workers would lose wages, consumers would pay more. Money and jobs would leave Canada, making us even more dependent on the Americans, just like Trump wants. It reminds us of Carney's decision to move his headquarters out of Canada to the US. This new tax would apply to lumber mills, steel mills, factories, aluminum plants, and they would in many cases simply leave. But I won't let that happen. Today I am announcing that a common-sense, Canada First Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces impose industrial taxes. There will be no taxes on consumers, no taxes on Canadian industries. Instead, provinces will continue to have the freedom to address this issue how they like, but there will be no federal obligation to impose the tax. We will also axe the tax on steel, aluminum, natural gas, food production, concrete, and other industries. Instead of taxes, we will use technology. Technology, not taxes, is the best way to fight climate change and protect our environment. While the Liberals tax businesses who use energy, Conservatives will cut taxes and boost incentives for those who bring down emissions. Carrot, not stick. We will expand eligibility for the clean technology and clean manufacturing investment tax credits. We will reward heavy industries who make products with lower emissions than the world average. So there were two parts to the question. One is about the Prime Minister holding meetings with leaders in Europe. Obviously, Prime Ministers have to meet foreign leaders in France, the United Kingdom, and all over the world. But meetings alone will not diversify our trade. We have a decade of non-stop international meetings, yet the share of our trade that goes, our exports that go to France and the UK has not budged. Why? Because we cannot get our products over the Atlantic. The Trudeau-Carney Liberals have blocked pipelines, LNG plants, mines, and other infrastructure that is needed to get our products over the Atlantic to the Europeans. I give you the example of France. France signed a natural gas supply agreement with Qatar. We could be selling that gas. We have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right beneath our feet. We have cold weather, as you're experiencing today, which makes it cheaper to liquefy the gas. We have clean hydroelectricity to power that liquefaction. The steel from places like this could go in an LNG plant, or in, I should say, dozens of LNG plants right across the East Coast and the West Coast and the Saguenay region. So why don't we repeal C-69, the No New Pipelines law, rapidly approve LNG plants, pipelines, mines, port expansions, so that we don't have to sell 100% of our natural gas exports to the Americans. I would have liked to seen Mr. Carney come home with a natural gas supply agreement signed with the French, the way the Qataris have done. We know they need our gas. Japan, Greece, Germany, France, and other countries, Ukraine, have all asked for our natural gas. But the radical net zero, keep it in the ground ideology that has guided the Carney-Trudeau Liberals for 10 years and caused the lost decade has prevented us from doing it. After a lost decade, we don't need to give the Liberals a fourth term. What we need is a real change to bring home paychecks and production and put Canada first.
This will be the last question.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. This is Kate McKenna from CBC News. Are you prepared to commit Canada to any kind of emissions target if you become Prime Minister? And if so, what would that look like?
We have to focus on technology and not taxes. First and foremost, we have to take back control of our economy. What would my emissions target look like? I treat this as a global problem. By bringing home production from more polluting foreign jurisdictions, we reduce global emissions while growing our own paychecks. I don't think it is an achievement to shut down a Canadian steel mill and then see one open up in China that produces 10 or 20 times more emissions for each unit of steel. What we need to do is acknowledge that the best way to reduce emissions is to bring home clean production here. For example, National Bank has calculated that we could displace 2.5 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions in India if we would supply them with our clean Canadian natural gas rather than having them power their economy with coal. 2.5 billion tons is 3 times the emissions of all of Canada. It makes more sense to bring emissions down by bringing jobs home through technology and not taxes, and that's what I announced today.